let's talk about multiclassing with Rangers, today on Flutes Loot. I have a link down in the description to an article I wrote about this very topic if you want to see it all written out, and I will include character concepts in there that were not included in this video. I have a poll with almost 6,000 responses about why people choose to multiclass, and usually it's because they want to do it for role-playing reasons, and the second reason would be for some kind of power build. They want to get some power out of their multiclassing. So let's talk about both today. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything gave Rangers some cool new tools with the optional class features, so the Ranger has more tools than ever at lower levels to make it more worthwhile playing. If you're talking about power builds, it's common for a martial class, even one with spellcasting like the Ranger, to start hopping off and do multiclassing by like level 7. This is mostly because most martial classes cap out in their power spiking with extra attack and gaining a few feats. So a lot of power builders will just look at what are the most important features and are they worth going forward, or is it better to multiclass, run the numbers, see what's fun. One thing about Rangers is they really excel when they use Crossbow Expert and Sharpshooter, feats that really increase their damage output. So in an optimal build, you're usually going to see those two feats on a Ranger build. This can make it difficult if you want to multiclass, where you're going to get something out of the multiclassing that is bonus action dependent, because your bonus action will often be devoted to using Crossbow Expert for a bonus action attack. It's not an absolute, but generally that's the assumption. The power of some Ranger spells will also vary depending on your DM allowing certain spells like Conjure Animals and how they're going to run those animals. Are they going to do it the way Wizards of the Coast say the rules are intended, where the DM chooses what animals you summon, or do you get to choose them yourself and the DM will say, okay? That really might affect whether you want to go to high levels with a Ranger. In order to multiclass with a Ranger, you do need to have 2 stats at 13, and they are Dexterity and Wisdom. Plus the other classes you want to multiclass with, you will need to meet the requirements for those classes as well. So let's talk about some common multiclass dips and focuses. When I say dip, I mean you're a Ranger and you dip 1 to 2, maybe 3 levels into another class to gain some utility. The best dips come from classes that get a subclass at level 1 because they often come with the most value. Those are Warlocks, Clerics, and Sorcerers. Many of the martial classes get their subclasses at level 3, and some, like Druids and Wizards, get them at level 2. You just got to keep those in mind for when you want to get the most value out of your multiclassing. After all, it can be tough to forego what you might get out of your core class to do some multiclassing. And if you don't time it right, you might miss some power spikes in the game, and it might be really difficult. Some common power builds involve the Ranger multiclassing with Fighter, particularly for Battle Master, to just gain maneuvers and superiority dice. Oftentimes a Ranger will dip into a Cleric level, like Peace or Twilight, that comes with a lot of value just at level 1, and spellcasting. One of the big takeaways if you want to do a real power build is you want to have a lot of spellcasting options, and those spells that you can learn need to be really impactful. There are some really top-notch picks among Cleric spells at level 1, so those are good picks. Rangers have their own spell list that's pretty substantial, like with Goodberry and Pass Without Trace, or whatever you think is fun, but those are some of the common ones that power builds will focus on. Some classes like Rogues don't get proficiency with medium armor when it could be useful for their defenses. They might want to dip into some Ranger levels to increase their armor class, get a fighting style, learn some spells, but you need to do a few levels of Ranger to make it really worthwhile. You probably want to go at least 3 levels if you're dipping into Ranger. If all you want is a fighting style, you might as well not multiclass and get a feat, or take 1 to 2 levels of Fighter so you can get the fighting style at level 1, or you can get the action surge at level 2. When it comes to role-playing multiclassing, I recommend we get kind of away from the mindset of, oh, how are you justifying becoming a Warlock or a Fighter? You haven't been doing those in your class. You can make a lot of assumptions about people during their downtime, but you can also assume that maybe, even though you're combining Ranger and Fighter, for example, or Ranger and Monk, you could just say that that was always the way their class was going to progress, because the characters don't know that they're a class. They don't know that they're multiclassing. They just know what skills they've been honing and what skills they gain from their experiences. So you can kind of change the paradigm if that's a roadblock for you of like, how can I justify multiclassing? Maybe you don't need to justify it. If you enjoy, though, the role-playing of multiclassing and being 2 blended classes and kind of defining the character as being 2 different classes, and it's like something they kind of know, you can totally do that. Let's get into some character concepts. I'm going to go through each Ranger subclass and give maybe 1 or 2 suggestions that I thought were fun, maybe more if there was enough of them. But if you want to see all my suggestions, definitely click the link in the description below, because that's where I have all of my ideas for different multiclass concepts. It would just be a long video if I went through each and every one. I think it would be fun to play the Beastmaster Ranger to 11 levels and multiclass for 9 levels of Nature Cleric. The Nature Cleric's bonus proficiencies lend well to a Ranger's skill sets. React to reduce elemental damage to you or an ally can be great, especially if you need to help your beast. And if you ever fight other beasts, you have excellent charm abilities with your Channel Divinity. If you really want to share spells with your beast, you could go 15 levels of Ranger, but I think it's more fun to get those Cleric levels. For one thing, you'll be boosting up your spell slot progression immensely. 11 levels of Ranger will mean that you know the Conjure Animal spell, and your upcasting will be even better for that spell because you have all those Cleric spell slots. I also like the idea of doing Beastmaster 3 levels and Shepherd Druid 17 levels. The Shepherd Druid is really strong. It's a very good summoner. You can cast a lot of Conjure Animals with that one, and then 3 levels of Ranger will give you some added options and a permanent little familiar. The Druid can use Find Familiar as of Tasha's to get a familiar, and then it can also have a Beast Companion that is always around through the Beastmaster. I would use the Beast Companion in this case not as an attacker like an assault animal, but instead as someone who's there to block you from incoming attacks and protect you. The next Ranger subclass is the Drake Warden from Fizzbands. You can be a Drake Warden, 16 levels, and a Wildfire Druid, 4 levels. That way you get all your ASIs, and you get the Wildfire Druid's base features. As a Drake Warden, it'll be cool to have a Fire Spirit that you could make it look like a little dragon, like Mushu, in addition to your larger Drake that you use for combat, so you have a bunch of animals around you. You can also do Find Familiar, so then you've got a Familiar, a Wildfire Spirit, and your Drake. The Fire Spirit can help you to teleport you and your Drake when enemies approach, so you can be riding on your Drake, going around the battlefield, making ranged attacks, and if anything gets too close, your Wildfire Spirit can help you teleport away. You can be very mobile and have a lot of fun. Alternatively, you could do still 16 levels of Drake Warden and go for Twilight Cleric, 4 levels. The Channel Divinity allows you to make an area around you dim light, and it gives temporary hit points to your allies when their turn ends within that area. This can involve your Drake and any of your allies that are nearby. You'll also get advantage on initiative checks, so you can make sure to move if you need to. And you and your Drake can gain super dark vision, so you can do some sniper runs. And if you don't like the Twilight Cleric, go for the Life Cleric, so you can do the coveted Goodberry combination, where you enhance the healing of all your Goodberries so you can keep your good boy Drake well fed. The Fey Wanderer Ranger is the next subclass, again going in alphabetical order. If the Echo Knight is allowed in your game, you could allow the Fey Wanderer to multiclass with a few levels of Echo Knight Fighter, and flavor that Echo as a Fey Spirit or a copy of yourself in a Fey Spirit form. I've heard the Fey Wanderer already compared to Peter Pan, so now you can do an Echo Knight Fighter to summon your Shadow, just like Peter Pan's Shadow is sentient. You can also combine the Fey Wanderer Ranger with the Wild Magic Barbarian. I'm not a big fan of wild magic, but it can be fun with a little dip if you just want to introduce a little bit of Fey chaos to your character. Plus you get rage and a few other bonuses of being a barbarian. That can be fun. Alternatively, you could just do a 1-level dip of Nature Cleric with your 19 levels of Fey Wanderer Ranger, particularly if you want to do more of a melee build as a ranger, so you want to use Shillelagh. It's a great cantrip for you to use Wisdom on your attacks instead of your Dexterity or Strength. If you want a power build, check out this one. Fey Wanderer Ranger will be your main as you go to 16 levels, and then you do 1 level of Divine Soul Sorcerer for some sorcerer spells, and for Favor of the Gods, bolstering your saving throws in a pinch. 1 level of Twilight Cleric for advantage on initiative, more spells, super dark vision, heavy armor, and then 2 levels of Undead Warlock, where you could choose invocations and have an interesting fear effect that you could activate, so your fear and charm abilities are enhanced as a Fey Wanderer Ranger. If you're wondering about that undead patron, you could even just pretend that it is an Arch-Fey Warlock patron, even though it's mechanically not, because the Fey deal in scary fear tactics too. They're not just all fanciful charms. If we're reflavoring the temporary hit points you get from Form of Dread, maybe when a creature hits you and you have those temporary hit points, the attacks phase through you like a Fey trick instead of an undead resilience. The next Ranger subclass is a big one. It's the Gloom Stalker, the power builder's dream. 1 power build for the Gloom Stalker involves 16 levels of Gloom Stalker Ranger, 1 level of Twilight Cleric, and 3 levels of Battle Master Fighter. Between the Gloom Stalker's features and the new Tasha's features for the base Ranger, you actually can outshine some whole subclasses like the Samurai, because you can just become invisible and make attacks, which is the same thing as the Samurai's ability to give you a bonus action to gain advantage, except instead you're invisible and making those attacks. Look at me, I'm a samurai, even though I'm not. Your dark vision is enhanced by the Twilight Cleric level. You can't be seen by dark vision if you're in darkness for the Gloomstalker, so you might always be invisible. So you might be constantly invisible to some creatures. Advantage on initiative rolls, action surge, maneuvers and superiority dice, ranger spells and ranger abilities. Fantastic character. I think a fun concept would be if I got a thief rogue to level 17, and I had all those bells and whistles that come with that subclass, including the ability to move twice in the first round of combat. I would love to just throw on some Gloom Stalker levels there as well. Becoming invisible in the dark, if creatures are relying on dark vision to see you, can really lend well to your thievery. You could possibly sneak up to someone when they think they can see just fine because they have dark vision, take something important from them, and sneak away. Fog Cloud could be your smoke bomb. Jump and Long Strider could make you better at getting around places. Detect Magic can make you a good detective finding magic items as you're trying to steal from someone. Horizon Walker Ranger is the next one. I think it would be cool to do 16 levels of Horizon Walker and 4 levels of Echo Knight Fighter. Similar to what I said with the Fey Wanderer, making the Echo Knight echo its shadow, the Horizon Walker could just double down on the basic Echo Knight lore that it's you from another dimension, an alternate dimension, another possibility of yourself. Horizon Walkers are already themed around portals and dimensional travel and those sorts of things, so maybe you just have become a little unstable during your travels and your dealings with portals, so sometimes you just can't help but manifest another possibility of yourself. But every time you do, you wonder what you're doing to another dimension if you are messing up its timeline. Similar to that, I think it would be cool to do 11 levels of Horizon Walker Ranger and 9 levels of Phantom Rogue. The Phantom side of your Phantom Rogue is based on your Horizon Walker's interdimensional travel expertise, but that dimensional travel is more based around the realms of the dead, so the Horizon Walker's horizon that it's talking about is the horizon of death. The Player's Handbook has our next subclass, the Hunter, but I think it would combo well with a Cavalier, where you go 7 to 13 levels of Hunter, 7 to 13 levels of Cavalier, and then just 1 level of Barbarian. You'll be resisting damage when you're raging, and you can also get a few methods between those subclasses to bolster your armor class, especially if an enemy tries to hit you more than once in a round. Another fun build for some less used subclasses would be Hunter, Ranger, and the Crown Paladin. You could use Champion Challenge, your Channel Divinity, to keep creatures within 30 feet of you close by. Then you could get the most use out of your Horde Breaker as you're making bonus action attacks to attack 2 adjacent enemies. Eventually you'll also get Whirlwind attacks, so you can attack all those creatures that you're keeping around you. You could have a lot of fun with it. Next is the Monster Slayer Ranger. Alright, this one's going to be a weird one. War Magic Wizard 3, Monster Slayer Ranger 15, and then your choice of 2 levels in either Fighter, Artificer, or Paladin. This is meant to be kind of a fun Mage Slayer type build that can thwart teleports with the Monster Slayer, pass saving throws with the War Magic Wizard's Arcane Deflection, and you can punish spell casting. You might be able to get smites or some action surge, fighting styles. The Artificer can give you some interesting utility. You'll also get the War Magic Wizard's Tactical Wit for your initiative rolls to be boosted. You want to jump on spellcasters before they can even move and just take them out. It can be useful to grapple those spellcasters too, so the Artificer's infusions that can help you with grapple checks could be useful, but you might just want to go for the Divine Smites or the Action Surge. You'll also be able to cast Silence and grapple the enemies, so that would be a great way to do it. You could also play into the Monster Slayer's investigative nature and just do 3 levels of Monster Slayer and 17 levels of Inquisitive Rogue. You get the Hunter's Sensibility, and that will only help the Inquisitive Rogue's abilities to sniff out monsters that are trying to appear as people. You'll also be able to intuit what their strengths and weaknesses are when you discover those monsters, so you can be a very strong investigative type character. The last Ranger subclass is the Swarmkeeper, one of my favorites. You could have some fun doing 14 to 15 levels of Swarmkeeper Ranger and 5 to 6 levels of Spores Druid, and treat Spores as your Swarm. Spores Druid will allow you to deal some more damage while you have some temporary hit points from your transformation. You'll bolster your spellcasting with the added Druid spellcasting progression, make little undead Spore servants. It's really fun to picture this being your Swarm, like you're just surrounded with spores. Another option is to do Swarmkeeper Ranger 11 and Soul Knife Rogue 9. You get the roguish spells from the Ranger like Pass Without Trace and Fog Cloud. Swarmkeeper magic gives you gaseous form for infiltrating places. You learn the web spell, which is always great for contributing to your team, and you'll be able to solo get sneak attack because your swarm will allow you to do 1 attack that knocks an enemy prone, and then you can attack again with advantage to get sneak attack. You could have a kind of swarm, like let's use the bees example that's in Natasha's, where you actually make a knife out of bees and then you can teleport with your bees and stuff like that. There's some fun little goofy things you could do, whether you want to be more psionic or more swarmy. If you have any more tips or any concepts for characters that I did not include, I would love to hear about them, and if there's something new that I think has to go in my article, I will gladly update my article and add your ideas. Don't forget to draw your bow and take a shot at that like button and that subscription button down below if you like this content. I hope you have a good adventure this weekend, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.